My name is Trish Blackwelder. I'm a distinguished Toastmaster, which is the highest educational award you can achieve in Toastmasters. I am also a past district governor for District 3, which is hosting this event today. In work life, I am a process design manager after years in technology and operations as a project manager and technical support person. So I am going to be drawing on a lot of that experience today. I want to say hi to Susan and hi to Ryan. Thanks for sharing your video. It's always nice to see a smiling face. And I want to thank Jim Ng, who is also a past district governor for District 3. He will be serving as the moderator during this session today. When we tested previously this week, I was able to share my application and have it display prominently. In order for you to truly see the presentation well, I'm going to need to have it overtake my entire desktop, which means I will no longer be able to see you. Given that restriction, I'm going to encourage you to interrupt whenever you need to so that I can address your concerns or answer your questions for you. Okay. This session is about negotiation make or break, but we're not necessarily talking specifically about negotiating big contracts or things like that. In life, every conversation you have is potentially a negotiation. I found this quote from a Toastmaster out of Edmonds, Washington, that I thought was very appropriate for our conversation today. Everything starts with conversation, whether it's making a sale, hiring an employee, or negotiating a lease. Excellent conversation skills are a must. In my career, my negotiation skills were not sharp when I first entered my career, and I found that my critical conversation moments generally applied in 2-minute elevator rides with CEOs. I almost ruined my career over one of those initial conversations, and that's when I realized I needed to improve my impromptu speaking skills. And that necessity is what drew me to Toastmasters, well, more years ago than I'm going to admit to now. I did not realize that every encounter that would come across my path is a potential career-breaking moment. You are constantly in negotiation, whether it's for networking, for career advancement, for building relationships. In whatever scenario you find yourself in, you could be in what would be classified as a negotiation conversation. As such, we're going to talk about some of the basics then for successful negotiations, or at least things to be aware of when you're negotiating. And you can take those and learn how to develop your own personal negotiation style, just as I have. So one of the first things that you need to be clear on is clarity. Regardless of the type of negotiation or conversation you are finding yourself in, you have to be sure that you have a clear position on what your goals or objectives are in that conversation. Just to give you another example, this morning I started my day with a 7 o'clock conference call that totally got hijacked, but I was there to achieve a specific objective. And it immediately turned into an opportunity then for me to have to negotiate that meeting back on track and make sure we accomplished the objective that I needed to achieve. If I had gone into that meeting without that clear objective, I would have been handicapped myself in being able to do that. So I knew what I wanted and I knew what I needed to accomplish, and I held on to that then as I guided the conversation back to where we needed to be. So whenever, not just when you know you're going to go into a meeting, but in your life, when you are in situations that are critical to your success, make sure that you are well grounded in what your ideal outcome would be, given the relationships with those people, what they could provide for you. Make sure that you know how to be best prepared. Do your homework and be confident then about the knowledge you have or the subject matter that you can be proficient in. Make sure you know how you intend to connect with the negotiating parties. So if you are reaching out to schedule those conversations yourself, make sure that you're prepared and you know who you need to have in those critical conversations. And then always you have to balance what you're willing to give up as well as what you will not give up. I have often shared with people that there are 5 non-negotiables with me, and I keep it simple so that I can count them on one hand, and sometimes we'll do that under the table during the conversation, reminding myself what's really important here. So again, this is just homework that you need to do to be prepared for these types of situations. Okay. When it comes to negotiation outcomes, if you study negotiation tactics at all, you'll run across these 4 common ones. Some people go in with a win-win attitude. Everybody's going to leave feeling better about something that they have gained something as a result of the negotiation. There are also people that go in with a win-lose attitude. I'm going to win, you're going to lose. Okay? This means that relationships generally are damaged, and that could be detrimental to your success overall. So bear that in mind if you decide to go in with that kind of an attitude. When it comes to compromise, everybody's going to reach agreement, but everybody's also going to have sacrificed something here. Again, knowing what you're willing to give up and what you cannot give up is very important when you get into this kind of a situation. Otherwise, you could end up losing everything. And then walking away. Have a line that when you reach that line, you know that when you get to that point, you have to be willing to just walk away. It's just not going to work. There's no sense in pursuing it. You're all beating a dead horse, so to speak, and you need to just end this. Here's a real life example of that. Once I got out as an adult on my own and I was thinking about buying my first car as an independent adult, I knew negotiating a car sale was going to be stressful. I knew what I could afford. I knew what I wanted. And I went to the dealership, took the test drive, and decided that, yep, I was going to put myself through that experience. At one point, the salesman started playing the typical sales game. Well, let me go check with my manager, or let me see what I could do, and making me sit and wait in the lobby, for them to come back for me. And eventually hit my threshold. And that was my line that I was not going to cross. I was not going to sit there and be treated that way. I was not going to be looked upon as, fluff because I was female and not be taken seriously. So I simply got up and I said, thanks, but you're wasting my time. And I walked out the door. I got a phone call a couple of days later, and he tried to sell me the car because I would look so good driving that car. I swallowed really hard and I gathered my composure and I said, really? That's why you think I want to spend that kind of money because it will make me look good? Nothing about reliability, dependability. This is, my vehicle that will support my lifestyle, but only because it's going to make me look so good. I said, don't ever call me again, and hung up the phone. So that was a real lesson for me to learn. And those are the kinds of things that you have to be prepared to do anytime you're in a critical conversation. So let me pause here and just see, because I, again, cannot see your faces any longer. How, any thoughts, any feedback on this information so far? Ryan, Sue, Jim? Is anybody out there? I'm going to assume you are, and that something is preventing you from talking to me. When it comes to styles of negotiation, again, this is a personal style that you need to develop. Don't just take one of these like clothing and put it on. Make sure that however you develop your style of negotiation, that it has integrity to who you are as an individual. You may be more of a competitive style. You may be more accommodating. You may compromise or always be striving for a compromise, or you may be very collaborative. The type of work that I do as a process design manager, I don't manage these people. I go in as a consultant to work with them on documenting their work processes. So my style is more along the lines of accommodation and collaborative. First, I need to get them to warm up to me and give me the information that I need to do the documentation that I'm asked to be delivering. And then collaborative. It's very much a collaborative experience where I need everyone sharing. So when I start hearing people get quiet, I know that there's a problem that I need to address. I'm negotiating to get that information, to put it on paper, and then get them to agree that what we have documented is accurate and they can be held accountable for it. So there is a risk to them that if they don't do the exercise properly, they could get held accountable for something that they really have no control over. So it takes days, hours, weeks to go through these exercises, and the effort, when I know I have done the effort well, when we've got something that everybody is very content with, and they actually are glad that they have done the exercise. So those are my objectives for my process design sessions. Okay. Did I hear somebody open a mic?
I was just getting logged back in. You're good, Trish.
Okay, thank you very much. When it comes to negotiation strategies, I think I've reiterated this a couple of times now, how important it is that above all, you remain objective and respectful, professional, calm, open-minded. If you need to excuse yourself and take a break or call a recess, do that. It's better than losing control of the situation. Take that break and try to get to a quiet place then where you can collect your thoughts and maintain your composure. Do not go to the restroom. You'll definitely bump into people in the restroom that will, again, sometimes retake the conversation there and back in. You are then kind of backed into a physical corner as well. So I try to find a restroom in a different location or on a different floor. I used to go out for a smoke break, even though I didn't smoke. So I would just say I need a fresh air break and excuse myself and go outside the building sometimes. But again, have your plan in the back of your head so that you know how you're going to execute that. Whenever I used to go on site to represent my company, and every time I did, I picked up a habit that I used when I flew for business, and is know where your exits are, know where your seat is, know where the alternate exit row is in case you have to go a different direction. It's a funny way for me, and I enjoy laughing about it. But I hope you find your own humorous way to remind yourself to know the environment that you're in and know how to use that environment as well to your advantage. Remember that in the first 5 minutes of any conversation or negotiation, you need to set the tone. You need to make sure that you're establishing what will or will not be shared. That if you're moving from where a current state is to a new state. How are you going to propose that and make sure that you have a list of what the impacts are going to be to that group or that person then by making those changes so that you get those things out on the table right away. Be sure that, again, you are very clear. If there are things that are non-negotiable or out of scope for the conversation, put those on the table so that people know that if they go there, not to be surprised when you say, we're not going there. That's a conversation for a different time. Use I statements so that the focus will stay on you if you are in charge of the situation. If it's a meeting that you're handling, try to always make sure that you reinforce that you are the moderator or the meeting leader or the conversation leader. If you're not, don't be afraid to use we, us, our, if that collaboration or that accommodation is part of the style for this particular conversation or negotiation. Don't be afraid to call out and say, I need your help or I need your cooperation. I have told teams, especially when a group is being very quiet, I said, I do not know your job. If you don't explain it here, no one will know your job. So here's your opportunity to share what it is that you do and what your current pain points are so that we can solve for those as part of this process. Make sure that you time the discussion too. Pick a time and location that's going to be convenient. Meet at a neutral place. If this really is a negotiation, having a neutral spot reduces some of the power play effects that some people will try to use. It's why I always feel awkward when I'm having to negotiate like a hotel contract, because you're there on the hotel and you have to be very careful then as you're doing your tour not to let them know you're so excited about this hotel and the setup is wonderful and everything is great. Because when you do those things during the tour, you lose any negotiation power you might have then when you go back to the office to actually negotiate the contract. Consider, the recommendation here is to consider morning meetings where people may be more energetic, but again, you have to know your environment. Perhaps you have more late starters than early starters in that specific situation, and afternoon might be better. I do agree with the avoid the meeting after lunch or late in the day. If I have to schedule a late meeting with a group, I will always start the meeting with a joke by telling them, I know I'm standing between you and dinner right now. So let's get to the matter at hand and let everybody get on with their evening then. So find, again, your own style of being able to handle those things. Okay. All right. So at this point, I'm going to stop the share, or I'm going to get some of my desktop back because the discussion questions are up and I really want to see your faces. Hi, Ryan. I really like your smile. Thank you so much for being here today. Susan, are you still out there by any chance? Can you share your audio, please? Okay, perhaps she's not in a position to be able to do that. All right, so Ryan, it's going to kind of fall on you here today, and then for the discussion. What did you think of this presentation? Did it stimulate any ideas or feedback you'd like to share?
Trish, first of all, thanks for a lot of big things. I think it's been mentioned in the chat, the line in the sand is so important, and for us not to give too much at the start. But it comes down to, I think, our own personal integrity. It's pretty much what's going on, and that's what leads the conversation. So I hear a little bit, share about more that line in the sand for ourselves.
Mm-hmm. It's always a tough thing to do. In a clear negotiation, it's a lot easier because you know what your budget is, or what you, how many resources you can bring to the table, things like that. You have tactical things that you can hold on to help you with that. But in business situations, a lot of times it's just you personally and what your line is. I'll share another story with you. One of the elevator conversations with the CEO was back when I used to do on-site certification of a software application our company installed. And I had been invited in for a week to do several certifications across multiple locations. At one point, I was invited to go out to dinner with the team. And although I kind of hesitated about doing it, I didn't want to, upset the CEO. So I accepted the invitation and I went. At the end of the evening, I excused myself early because I had no intentions of partying late into the evening with this group. I had to be up early to certify the next day. And as I left, the CEO followed me and stepped on the elevator with me. Now, that unnerved me just a bit because I'm thinking, why is he doing this? There's a lot of options that, are possibilities flashing through my head at the moment. So I went to one side of the elevator and I wanted to make sure he went to the other side of the elevator and not anywhere near me. And fortunately, he did. So I wasn't ready to engage too much with him, but I wanted to be polite. And then he laid the line on me. He goes, "So, I'm paying for all these extra days for you to be here." And I kind of waited. Your point, kind of thing. And I said, okay. Actually, it was cheaper for me to stay the extra days than it was for me to fly out, fly back, fly out again. Well, it just seems like you're tapping my budget. And I said, well, let me put it to you this way. Perhaps that offsets the cost of my boss paying my salary to do your work all week long instead. And I timed that line to be done as soon as it hit my floor and the elevator doors opened and I could step out and say good night, and he did not follow me off the elevator. Now, I was young in my career still. I will tell you, I went back to my hotel room. I called my boss, left a voicemail for him, said, I may just have done a career limiting move. I never heard anything more about it though, so I assumed that my point got made. But that was how I learned that every situation is a potential negotiating situation. He wanted to take power over me and manipulate me, and I couldn't allow that to happen. I have to be in charge of that validation. I can't let him reduce any influence I have over that team. And I had to put him in his place, but I had to do it without getting fired, so you have to be prepared. You have to be sharp. I don't want to say you never let your guard down because there's life and you do let your guard down. But when you're conducting business or when you're building your career or you're starting a new business for yourself or you're in a situation like I am where you go in and work with teams that aren't your regular team that you work with, you have to remember that every single one of those situations is a critical conversation and a potential negotiation, whether it's for a contract, whether it's for your integrity or your power or your control over the situation. You have to be ready to have that. And that's why you have to be comfortable in your own skin and know where your personal lines are. Okay.
Appreciate it.
Okay. Do you have a situation that you want to share perhaps? Have you ever, is this information you're all familiar with, that you're familiar with, or how are you practicing this for yourself? If you would like to share, you don't have to, but if you'd like to, that always helps me.
I'm thinking this of professionally and having conversations. I work with families and business owners and talk with them about their financial goals, and we build strategies in terms of how they can actually accomplish those goals. And I think it's a negotiation as well. Oftentimes people already have a goal strategy. If I'm going to come in and discuss that there may be something that's different, there you ensure that you're being heard and from disrupting, stepping over a line. So it's important to recognize where people are coming from. And I often find that if I talk too much, it seems to do more harm than good, because we can't possibly know what is going on between someone's ears, what's going on in their thoughts.
Right.
And the only way to do that is by active communication and being able to have good conversations, understand where they are. We can discuss where we are. And I ultimately love the first of the 4 outcomes, which was the win-win. I think there's an environment of abundance where we can all get what we want as long as we work together. And it may not be the right time for everything, but as long as we provide that positive outlook and provide actual service or value, I think at the end of the day, we seem to see the results that benefit everyone.
That's excellent. I'm assuming that for your particular profession, then you've prepared opening questions, things where you can start drawing that information out of people, know how to peel back those onion layers, dig a little bit deeper, pull a string, to get a little bit more information, but not necessarily just pound on them all at once. Get what you need, get the conversation started, set up another question, then pull the string, get a few more answers. That is a really good way to do it. It establishes a good rapport then with the other people or person or group, and allows you to build your own integrity too at the same process, to where they trust and start opening more. That's an excellent way to do it. I wish you continued success then. Okay. All right. Susan, is Susan out there still?
I think Susan was on the chat. I don't know if anyone's able to type in the chat if they don't have audio. I'm happy to read it. Yeah, Susan's here.
Okay.
And it looks like Nancy may be here as well.
Yes.
And
Nancy,
we saw Jim is commenting also.
Okay. Susan, thank you for using the chat then. Now that I can see the chat, do you have any feedback or any other questions that you wanted to ask today? Now, Nancy and Jim, along with myself, are longtime Toastmasters. I'm almost afraid whether I'm going to open their mics. No. Jim or Nancy, is there anything that you'd like to add to the conversation today?
Thank you, Trish. I'm assuming you can hear me.
I can.
Great. What I found really helpful, even though I do have a lifetime experience of negotiating both well and poorly, I appreciate that tip about especially having it's not really a bottom line, but a threshold that just say that this is not working and I need to walk away, because there's been a lot of really uncomfortable situations where I've gone past what that level of threshold. And so that is a really important tip, especially when you're going into something that is important, whether it's a large financial example as doing your car, or even some personal relationship kind of negotiation, is understanding that we do all have that point. And being upfront about it and understanding that, I think, will save a lot of people a lot of time.
I'm glad you brought back the car story that I had shared, and Susan just added a comment about it being especially important for women. Susan, that is how the car situation came about, or where I knew where I was going to draw my threshold. The very first car, I had a job where I had a company car for 8 years, and all of a sudden I, decided to move on to a different career. I wasn't going to have a company car anymore. It wasn't exactly a plan. Not that I was let go. It just happened faster than I thought it would. And I didn't have the financial resources yet to buy a car outright. Plus, because I hadn't made any major purchases, my credit history was next to nothing. My mother had agreed to give me a threshold of $10,000. And this was many, many years ago when you could get a new car for under 10 grand. But when I went to the dealership, I did not know how to negotiate. So I basically told them, I saw this car. It's under $10,000. I have $10,000. I want to drive that car off the lot today. I gave them everything up front. I held nothing back. They kept me in that dealership for close to 3 hours, torturing me, trying to sell me add-ons, trying to do all this kind of stuff until I was brought to tears. I said, I told you already, I have $10,000. I don't need anything else. I want that car, and I just wanted to drive off the lot. I had never been so humiliated in my entire life. I did drive off the lot with the car. I immediately went out and refinanced it to establish my credit, and I paid my mother back. But I learned such a lesson about, number one, not being prepared for that kind of conversation, and number two, being a woman in a man's world. That was horrible. And fortunately, the world is better now, but you never know when you're going to run into an old style guy who still believes it's 1980, So I think for women, these tactics that we've been talking about are very important to learn. Okay. Jim, have you been able to connect to us? Okay, looks like he may not be able to share his audio. All right, well, let's go through some of these other questions then. How important is it then, do you think, to maintain a professional and appropriate composure during a negotiation? What kind of triggers typically make you struggle with being able to maintain that composure? Anything else you want to talk about today?
Common triggers, Trish, that do cause us all as individuals to react or lose composure, or is it just very specific to who we are?
I think it's more personal, depending on what your profession is and what your position in that company is. May influence some things. If you have somewhat of a inferiority complex, that may make you more sensitive to certain triggers. Because I'm a woman, I'm more sensitive to male dominant, type triggers, phrases that are said that tend to light my fire immediately. And because I know where my triggers are, I've already pre-prepared in my mind what I'm going to do to solve for that. So depending on what some people would call baggage is, you need to know what kinds of situations are likely to put you in a vulnerable state then. And then those would be the kind you'd want to rehearse your responses so that you kind of go into automatic mode instead of just responding. When I was going through a divorce, a nasty divorce, I knew my ex-husband knew exactly how to push my hot buttons. So this is extreme, but just to tell you, in my quiet time at night, I would prepare how I would respond for the things I knew he would probably throw at me. And I wrote them on Post-it notes, and I put them on the wall above my phone. And I thought, I knew everybody would laugh at me if I ever shared this story, but now I can share what happened. One day, he went after me on the phone, and I didn't think to just hang up. But the fact that I had those answers up on the wall, I just stood there and I focused on every one of those post-it notes, and I held my composure and I dealt with him on the phone. And then when I was sharing that with a friend of mine later, she goes, your elbow, it goes both directions. And we laughed, and I said, yes, next time I will exercise my elbow. But it wasn't on my list, so I didn't think of it when I was under pressure. That's why it's good to rehearse a few of those things. Anyone else? Jim, Nancy, Susan?
Trish, I do want to comment about thinking about scenarios, because really when you're having negotiations, it's the unexpected that throws you, that causes you to either react emotionally or leaves you at a loss because you don't have a comeback because you haven't thought about it. So I think, again, for important negotiations, that taking the time to think about what are the most unexpected reactions that might happen. I know that's why so many organizations do sales training and do that kind of training ahead of time so that you don't get caught by surprise. So I do think like CPR training in advance for negotiation, if you have some prepared ideas and thoughts, then it doesn't take you by surprise, and that you do have something to fall back on. Because as humans, that's that whole fight or flight, that your adrenaline kicks in when you're confronted by something that especially startles you, and not being able to have a response, but also to have that.
Sometimes it's just incredibly innocent. When I went to work for the company that started the career I have now, I remember at one point the CEO announced that several of us were going to be relocating to Arizona to start a new offshoot of the company. And I was very excited because I had also heard that would be a title increase for me, and I assumed an appropriate pay raise for the title increase. When I got called into the office and to discuss the details with the CEO, I was floating on cloud nine about, having them pay my expenses to relocate to Arizona and getting my title increase. I made the faux pas, so to speak, of saying, when he told me about the title increase, and I said, and I'm assuming that will come with a raise as well. And I was, again, all smiles, all excited. And he swallowed and said, well, we're relocating you to Arizona. The cost of living there is less. That's your raise. I had not researched cost of living for Arizona. I had no ammo, nothing to come back with. The negotiation was over. I lost and I left the office, so it was it. That was my raise, was the fact that I was being relocated to a state that had a lower cost of living. It was a hole I spent years digging out of. All right. So we've talked a little bit about different negotiation styles. Has anybody been in a situation where they had to change negotiation styles, or went through a negotiation that helped you identify your negotiation style? Jim.
Hi, everybody. First, I want to say Happy New Year, Trish, Brian, Nancy, and Susan. And thank you again for working out the technical difficulties or challenges so that I'm able to get in and share. What I'd like to share is I like to use the win-win negotiation tactic. And what I'd like to share is so important. I may have missed it if you had mentioned it, but negotiation is something that we need to practice every once in a while. For example, when you were talking about the car buying purchasing event, My wife Carol does not like going to the car dealership with me, but I do like to go in every once in a while to practice my negotiation tactics, even though I'm not really planning to buy a car. It's just because these salesmen are used to selling. And so my wife hates coming with me, but I love to go look at cars. And I know when a salesman comes out, and yes, you're right, they can suck up a lot of your time. So you have to be able to practice a little bit and then just walk. So, but where I'm trying to get at is we do need to every once in a while to practice those negotiation skills and make it, I always say, let's make it a win-win situation. Like you said, I only have $10,000, take it or leave it. And so, but that's what I want to share is something that we don't really think about practicing negotiation tactics, but that's what I want to share.
Most people don't. And that's one of the reasons I joined Toastmasters. Those elevator rides with the CEO were coming daily, and I knew I was at a loss. I did not know how to respond most of the time. I did not know how to ask probing questions. And somebody had invited me to a Toastmasters meeting, and I decided I would go. I thought I was going to hear about selling toasters, but no, that was not the case. When I got there, I found out it was all about communication skills, not just giving presentations, but giving feedback. And then the impromptu speaking portion of the meeting, that made all the goosebumps stand up. And I leaned over to the person who had invited me and I said, this is what I need. Where do I sign up? And so I live for impromptu speaking at the Toastmasters meeting. I'll give the speeches, I'll give the evaluations. Well, now I like giving evaluations too, but those parts are what most people talk about when it comes to Toastmasters. I joined because of the impromptu speaking, and I stay because that is a skill I cannot lose. And you're right, Jim. What I take from Toastmasters meetings, I then apply everywhere I go, whether it's a conversation with someone in a grocery store or someone at work or an elevator conversation now with the CEO. I no longer hide from from stepping on an elevator with the CEO. I'm just like, can I fit? I'm in. Just get in there and go with it. All right. What does it mean, really, to foster agreement between parties? We've talked about several things, but in the last question I'm going to ask for this session, what do you think it means to foster agreement? Is it to win? Is it to reach consensus? Let's talk about that a little bit. What does it mean to you, Ryan?
For me, I think it's reaching consensus. And aspect that I just wanted to bring up in terms of the negotiation skills that I have. I spoke about it before. Communication is so important. We need to know what's going on in the other person's head. I use a tool that I call replay, verify, acknowledge, then reframe. And basically, if someone says something at you that could catch you off guard, all you have to do is repeat back what they said. They'll verify that you actually heard them correctly, and then you can thank them for actually letting you know what they're talking about and being honest and having a conversation. And then we can pivot from there and ask an additional question. Mm-hmm. And if we can ask or what did you mean by that? I think that really opens it up so that they can actually where their question's coming from or where they were going with what they were saying. I think about you in the elevator with the CEO. I who believe someone would be bold and say things like that, but what was he trying to say? And to spin it back at someone quickly can be very powerful. I think to understand where they're coming from and allow us to take a breath to think through what the situation is as well. Ultimately, I think fostering agreement though is communicating so you understand what both parties and then coming together so that you both get that win-win scenario.
That's great. And I like your not an acronym, but your four things. Build on that, and then next time you teach this class, okay?
Happy to share.
All right. Just as I know some of you will need to be exiting to move on to other sessions, I want to put up on the screen that there are 2 other resources that I highly recommend. Again, they're not limited to negotiation, but Kiss, Bow, and Shake Hands. I had the opportunity to establish what was potentially a contract arrangement between the United States and European partners. And reading this book I was complimented a number of times during those sessions about how well prepared I had prepared the US people as well as handled the Europeans. And I have touted this book ever since because that's where I learned what I learned. The Art of Small Talk is an article that was written by a Toastmaster that is very appropriate to that opening quote about every conversation is potentially a negotiation session. So I highly recommend both of these resources to you. And down at the bottom, yes, it's in small print, I know, is my email address if you want to reach out with any other questions or comments that you might have about today's session. We have 1 minute, so I will just say if anybody has anything else they want to share, it's open mic time. If not, I'll leave this up until we close the session. And thank you everyone for your time and attention today.
Trish, great job.
Thank you, Ryan. Thank you, Nancy. Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Susan.
Okay, thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.